the process of surgical innovations, it's a very long process. It's not like a 1 year project that you can bring an idea to become a product.
Hi everybody, I'm Rox De Leon and this is episode 14 of A Curious Character. This episode is a conversation with Dr. Philip Fullante. In this episode, we dive into Dr. Philip's motivation for pursuing medicine, from undergraduate education to clinical practice, to pursuing a surgical innovations fellowship, getting involved with UP SIBOL, and the potential of biomedical innovations in improving healthcare. Let's get started with this episode. Hi, Doc Philip. Welcome to A Curious Character.
Hello. Hello, Rox.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for accepting my invitation to have basically a recorded conversation. So for today, our conversation will revolve around your introduction to biomedical innovations and how you ended up working with engineers like myself through the UP Civil program. But before we dive into that topic, I thought a good introduction would be for you to tell us a bit about your background. Could you tell us a bit about we can start with your undergraduate story. What did you study for undergrad? And
Okay.
then, the journey leading to applying for medical school and such.
Ang first choice ko sa UPCAT, sa application, is biology. No? Kasi nga, yun ang alam naming pre-med course. So, since high school, since elementary, yun talaga, parang siguro na-indoctrinate sa amin ng mga magulang namin na maganda maging doctor. So, yun, mula ang high school namin, science high school, tapos pagka-graduate nun, kailangan makapasok ng UP. Ang napili ko sa UP, kasama ng iba kong mga kaibigan, biology. Kailangan magsulat ka ng second choice. Sinulat ko second choice, chemistry. Kaya lang, quota course kasi ang biology that time. So, punong-puno. So, tinapon kami sa chemistry. First year ko sa chemistry, medyo mahirap mahirap din ang chemistry eh. So sabi ko talaga, ang sabi sa amin, mahirap makapasok ng medicine pagka tinuloy namin ng chemistry na undergraduate course. So we were planning then to shift to biology. Pero shifting to biology was a bit daunting at that time kasi kailangan daw we need to get a GWA of 1.25 yata to shift to biology. My average wasn't cut out to to shift to biology. So I stayed in chemistry hoping na I'd still get into the medical program. Actually, I love chemistry. No? Eventually, I love chemistry. I began to think about options other than going to medicine. In chemistry, I realized that I have several options. I could be a faculty, a teacher, could take up a master's or PhD program in chemistry. So that would be the researcher and faculty track. No? Or I can go to industry. So there are a lot of local and international industries that are looking for chemistry graduates. No? And of course, there's the medicine option. So yun yung undergrad.
So why did you end up pursuing, applying to med school in the end?
I think it's because going to medicine is really my parents' dream for me. No? And partly, I also really wanted to get an MD degree. Thinking about it, I'm not really sure how if I came to that decision really just on my own or I was really influenced by so many years of my parents telling me that being a doctor is better.
Yeah, but then after po kasi na you get into medicine, you realize that there are so many specializations that you could go into. So another decision that you have to make is what will be my specialization afterwards? Why
So
did you choose to go to your current
uh,
specialty?
that's also a long, long and winding story. Uh, when I was thinking I wanted to go to medicine because I wanted to be a doctor for kids. So I wanted to be a pediatrician. But along the way, when we got to our third year or fourth year in medicine, we're during that time already going to the clinics. We're exposed to the wards, the outpatient department, especially the emergency room. That's the time when I realized I'm not cut out to be a pediatrician. Uh, it's I found it difficult to look at sick kids. I wanted to play with the kids, no? So of course, if they're healthy, you can play with them. But if they're stuck in their beds, they're bedridden, it's heartbreaking. No? It's the pediatric ward has a sorry if I offend my peds colleagues. No? Uh, the pediatric ward in the PJH is quite gloomy, especially if you'd be taking care of the really sick ones, those who are intubated or who need special monitoring. So that's when I decided that maybe I should look for other options after graduating. And that's when I saw the surgery is my next it's my target specialization. So when we graduated, after the board exam, we thought of applying for the residency programs in PGH. So I applied to two programs, surgery and ENT. During that time, it's a no-no to apply to two departments at the same time. Yeah, your plan of parang if you want to make sure that you get into a program, that might backfire because it's a small hospital. It's a big hospital, but the consultants there don't know each other. So if they knew about you applying to another program, you might get into trouble. And it actually did. They knew about my application to another department, so they asked me about it during the interview. So I really thought that I might not be able to enter any program during that time.
But wouldn't it be recommended to put your eggs in multiple baskets?
I think that was a good strategy, but maybe because there's some sort of a turf war, especially if you're applying into cutting specialties, surgical specialties. So they'd be saying, "Oh, why are you applying into two programs?" The consultants would want now to test your resolve. Which one do you really prefer? And when you say you prefer that department, the department who's asking you, the other department might hear about it. So
So it seems like it's just better to apply for the same specialty in multiple hospitals than in one
yes,
hospital with multiple
yes,
specialty.
yes, yes.
Okay.
If you do that, that might be a bigger that might be a bigger boost to your application to PGH
Yeah.
because the consultants there would see that you're really interested in going to that program.
Yeah. What's the
Mhm.
result? What ended up happening after that
Uh,
application?
well, I decided to quit the pre-residency of the other program. I was already accepted in the surgical
Ooh.
program into plastic surgery, but I then decided to go to ENT instead.
Isn't surgery po a big parang department? You have neuro, you have ortho,
Yes. Uh-huh.
and everyone just enter one general surgery program and then later
Mm-hmm.
on.
Uh-huh. So
Okay.
just to correct you, ortho is a different department. It's not
Oh.
under surgery. So the subspecialties in surgery are the general surgeries. There are three divisions in general surgery. Then we have the pediatric surgery, plastic surgery, urology. During that
Mm-hmm.
time, neurosurgery is still under the Department of Surgery. Then we have the
Mm-hmm.
thoracovascular, thoracic and
Cardio,
cardiovascular surgery,
cardio,
or
uh-huh.
cardiothoracic surgery in other places.
Right.
What else?
What about internal medicine? Is it a separate
Uh,
residency also?
it's a
Oh.
separate residency. It's a non-surgical program. Dr. Jorge is in that field in pulmonology. It's an internal medicine subspecialty. Even
Uh-huh.
the cardiologists, they're internal medicine subspecialists.
Is it safe to assume that all doctors know how to stitch? Lahat kayo marunong with,
Yes,
I don't know,
yes.
that's a, okay,
The basic
okay.
the basic principles. Yes.
Okay, so I think that's a great transition po with my next question, which is your how you got involved with the surgical innovations fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I was interested about learning about that and your story of getting into that program. I think before I went to the MTM program, I've heard about you and Doc Patty. I think
Yes.
from Doc
Mm-hmm.
Louie. So
Mm-hmm.
interesting transition from you being an ENT and then you go into a surgical fellowship or
Mm-hmm.
surgical innovations fellowship. What was the story behind that?
Actually, it's not really that far off from being a surgeon. So, being a surgeon, especially in a resource poor environment like in PGH back then, you don't have the complement of instruments. You don't have a complete set of certain instruments. So we tend to innovate in terms of uh, doing stuff, especially in the operating room. We've often tried to improvise with certain tools. If we don't have a particular instrument that's supposed to do that process or something on a patient, then we try to make one ourselves. But because we don't know that surgical innovation is more of a research field, we don't document what we do. So I think surgery has been at the forefront of surgical innovation, especially if you find out that most of the instruments available in the operating rooms are named after surgeons. Most
Oh.
of the different instruments, like the instruments that hold tissues or grasp tissues, there are a lot of forms of those types of graspers, and because certain tissues are very delicate than the other parts of the body, so most surgeons tend to find out, or they try to devise or fabricate different instruments that would handle the tissues that they're handling better. So over the years, we've developed a lot of instruments in the operating room, and most of these instruments have uh, they're eponymous. They're named after surgeons who developed them. Uh, they asked engineers or technicians to fabricate those types of instruments. So going back to your question about how I got into the program. So Dr. Alberto Rojas and Dr. Acosta, uh, they um, they wrote a proposal under the Philippine California Advanced Research PICARI,
Institute.
Philippine California Advanced Research Institutes initiative. The PICARI had a grant back then. It's a grant under the Commission on Higher Education. So they were able to get a grant for a surgical innovation and an MTM fellowship program. And so the objective of that program is to bring faculty to California, to the University of California, to train under either a surgical innovations fellowship program or the Masters in Translational Medicine program. So the Masters in Translational Medicine program was a very competitive. You have to undergo a very competitive application. So I decided not to take that that track. So I instead signed up for the Surgical Innovations Fellowship Program. But actually, Dr. Alberto Rojas was he tried to recruit anyone from the different cutting specialties to sign up for the program. So he spoke in one of our Grand Rounds conference in ENT, and when he presented the idea, and while he was presenting the idea, all of the consultants, all of the faculty staff in the department were looking at me
Oh, why
because
so?
at that time At that time, I was the youngest faculty. So that means if the department wants to send someone, that would be me. Well, I guess it's a good opportunity back then. So yeah, you can. It's a 1-year program in the U.S. Of course, I initially had some reservations going to the U.S. because that means I'd be leaving my private practice.
Mhm.
So 1 year would mean that I'd be losing a slot in some of the clinics. So I was worried that when I get back, I might not have any clinic to go back to. Well, eventually, I did decide to go ahead to sign up in the program. It's a 1 year. It's more of an on-the-job training in surgical innovation research under Dr. Harrison, Michael Harrison of the
What
Department of
year was
Surgery.
this? What year was
That
this,
was
Doc?
in 2016.
Okay, so 2017.
Yeah. So it was it was almost 5 years ago.
Wow.
So we were almost exactly 5 years ago.
I didn't look at that from that perspective. I think that's an interesting perspective that you gave me about joining a fellowship. Because the first time that I've heard about that, I knew about the surgical innovation fellowship and like, okay, this for medical doctors and such. And from my perspective, if such an opportunity lands to you, you'll just grab it. But I didn't realize that you also have to think about your private practice, establish so and so, leave your family and such. So yeah, that's an interesting point that I think I wouldn't consider because I'm young and
Mhm.
basically don't have much responsibilities yet
Mhm. So
during those time.
most of the time, most doctors would go out of the country for fellowships right after residency training because they haven't set up any clinics yet, and it's the best time to go out. They're fresh out of training. They're still most residency graduates are still eager to learn. But in my case, I was already practicing. I've already settled down. Already had a family back then when we started the surgical innovations program. So it's a really tough decision to make.
So what happened during that fellowship, during that 1 year? What did you do at UCSF?
Mhm. Well, I saw that where the Philippines is really behind in 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 device innovation. Maybe we're at par with other countries in terms of drug discovery, clinical trials for drugs. But in terms of surgical innovation as a research and as a means of translating basic knowledge to clinical applications, we're quite far behind. But in terms of problems and ideas, I think we're not that far off. It's
You have
just
a
that
lot
we
of
don't
more
have the
problems. Yeah.
yes, we have more problems. It's just that we did not know that we have the resources to be able to address those problems. And uh, California, in San Francisco, in which is quite near Silicon Valley, it's a tech innovation. It has a very mature technology innovation environment. So doing surgical innovations, doing innovations in technology it's really it's easy for doctors to do those kinds of activities in the US, especially in the West Coast, and they
Yeah.
have a lot of money to spend, and they're not worried about spending or investing in innovations.
Yeah, exactly. And it's relatively easy to find potential investors
Mm-hmm.
who are willing to put this
Mm-hmm.
technology to market.
Mm-hmm.
No? And you can always have your startup, be acquired by like Medtronic, Abbott, or Genentech, or these big
Yes.
companies in the Silicon
Mm.
Valley area.
And they're always on the
So
lookout actually
yeah,
for innovations.
yeah, I remember there is one building in UCSF that's called Genentech, the Genentech
Mm-hmm.
building. So just goes to show how much they've invested in
Mhm.
poured money to the research being done in the university. What did you do during the fellowship? Like, did
Mhm.
you work on a certain project, or how was it like?
Yes, the moment we got into San Francisco, into the university, we were already joining the Dr. Harrison's team in their meetings, in their research team meetings, talking about various projects. And during our stay there, Katiko and I, we were already assigned to uh, Dr. Harrison's research team. Uh, uh, they were really inclusive in that we were not just treated as observers.
Mhm.
They let us participate in their research activities. I was given a team assignment as a visiting researcher in an IRB submission for one of the research trials. So
Wow.
it's really a hands-on training in surgical innovations or biomedical innovations research. So I was very lucky to see how a research idea was brought from paper to the bench to the clinics. And that really molded how we wrote how the SIBOL program was going to be defined. Actually, the experience in San Francisco really enlightened me and Kathy that the process of surgical innovations, it's a very long process. It's not like a 1 year project that you can bring an idea to become a product. There we saw that most of the projects that we were involved in, it's most of these devices are already in their 5th to 10th year being developed, and most of the hurdles that they encounter are in the clinical trials part. They were able to publish papers about their proof of concept, the animal studies, cadaveric studies for some projects that did not need any animal studies anymore. They were able to publish those in 1 to 2 years from designing the products. But being able to jump from the laboratory to the clinics, that was a really long
Long time.
and hard process for them. Too many regulatory hurdles to overcome. And just like what we're encountering now in COVID researches, the proponents, the innovators really have to prove that their products are safe, that their products are really effective before the FDA can allow them to proceed with marketing the device, or even for the university institutional research board, ethics board, to approve any clinical research involving human subjects. So
I'm curious what the team composition is like in that research group.
looking at their team, it was really an eye opener for me, because the surgery department, of course, you'd expect surgeons to be in the department, but when you look at their roster, they have basic scientists in their faculty roster, they have engineers in their faculty roster, and
And that's
their research team.
Department of
Surgery.
Surgery. Oh, wow.
Yes. So within the department, they have teaching duties, they have service duties for the hospital, and they have a research component, of course. And that research component, they have in-house basic scientists, PhD holders, non-doctors, engineers. So they don't have to talk to the College of Engineering, because UCSF, I don't think they do. The process of surgical innovations, it's a very long process. It's not like a 1 year project that you can bring an idea to become a product. They don't have a College of Engineering in UCSF, but
Mhm.
most of their engineers, when they meet with engineers, they're in Berkeley. But their research teams are not composed of engineering faculty from Berkeley. They have in-house engineers in their department. So surgical innovation was really it's a well-run, well-oiled component of their department.
And UC Berkeley and UCSF actually have I think it's very analogous to UP Manila and UP Diliman in a sense that they are both public universities also, and one is health focused and the other is sciences and the arts. But one advantage, like what you said, of UCSF is also having engineering faculty and experts with basic science background in within their campus, within their reach. So one thing that they are implementing is the joint bioengineering PhD program between Berkeley and UCSF.
Mhm.
And the MTM also is joint between Berkeley and UCSF. And that's how I got to get a bit of a glimpse of how the surgical innovations lab in San Francisco General. So I've been there a couple of times testing phantoms and such for my capstone. But it was an interesting perspective just seeing in a single laboratory you have people who know how to how to use the pipette things, and then you have electrical engineers who know how to solder stuff. They're like, yeah,
Just in one laboratory.
yeah, yeah, that's very exciting. And we tend to daydream like, oh, sa Philippines kaya.
Yes. Hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, exactly. Now moving forward to how many years later, getting involved with UP SIBOL. How did that start? Was that like immediately after your fellowship you started crafting with Doc Ewang and the others the soon to be
Mhm.
UP SIBOL program? What's the history behind it?
Well, so after my surgical innovations fellowship, I was also involved in another PICARI project, another biomedical innovation project. I'm not sure if you've heard about the Hearing for Life, the HELIP project of Dean Chong, Dr. Portia Marcelo, and Professor Luis Sison. It was really based on, actually, it was born out of a meeting with Professor Sison, because I was also involved with the National Telehealth before I was involved in the Surgical Innovations Program. I actually was an MS Health Informatics student before I got into
Oh,
surgical innovations. I was able to finish the courses, the core courses. I actually finished all of the subjects except for the thesis because I was a clinician. I was busy with doing in private practice back then. I really didn't have the time to finish the thesis. And doing a thesis in UP Manila, it's really time consuming. Going forward, moving kind of fast forward, I was also working with the National Telehealth Center I was the domain expert for ENT for the doctors to the barrios. So they had the telemedicine program for the doctors to the barrios. So I was a domain expert. So eventually they were working on the RX box. I'm not directly involved with the RX box, but they were looking for new projects to do. So I was in one of their meetings, and Prof. Season was presenting their prototypes, the several projects that may have clinical applications. And I think I mentioned that one problem for ENT is the newborn hearing screening. I think he was already also looking at that line. I think they already had an auditory brainstem response
response. Yes.
project going on, and they were able to go to that go with that project because they've already developed the ECG component of the RX
Yeah.
box. So
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to broaden the functionalities of RX box. So we thought of, oh, maybe we can do an ABR device, not just a newborn hearing screening device, but an actual diagnostic device for hearing evaluation. We were talking about writing a proposal, but of course, since there was no funding that we can submit that, it took us so long to get it together. Then came the PICARI call for collaboration with UC, in any campus in the University of California. So I think Doc Portia got a call from Prof. Season and another engineer, and they were already talking with a researcher from the University of California. So they were thinking about a telehealth project. And then they looped me in their email. And then I mentioned that maybe we can do a biomedical device project with newborn hearing screening in mind. And I think they liked the idea because Prof. Season has one project. The hero, is that the hero?
Yeah,
The
that
hero
project.
project.
Yeah,
I
we
think.
went to the ear unit of PGH,
Uh,
interviewing the nurse and
mm,
such. Yeah, so that's
I
the
think
humble
it's already
beginnings.
a working prototype, right? Back then.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so when he mentioned that, and I thought about the newborn hearing screening law, that Dean Chong was having a hard time making sure that the reporting of the newborn hearing screening would increase by, I think it was passed in 2009, 2010, but in 2015 the database for the newborn hearing screening wasn't really populated that much. I think they just had less than 20% of the database filled in. So they wanted something that would fill the gap. So that's when the Hearing for Life project was born. Actually, it's not just a product innovation. It's also a telemedicine innovation project. So that's why Dr. Portia was also involved. I think it took us 2 weeks to write.
Wow,
Mm-hmm. And I
nice.
was I wasn't going to the clinic during that time just to finish the narrative and the budget for that project. So that was a project that we had concurrently with my Surgical Innovations Fellowship. When I signed up for the Surgical Innovations Fellowship of Dr. Alberto Rojas, it was also the time when we were notified by DOST that our Hearing for Life proposal was also
Granted.
approved. Yes. So I think the Surgical Innovations and the MTM program was cycle one. Is that I think it's a cycle one, Picari cycle one project.
Mm-hmm.
Our ABR project was I think it's a cycle two. So the project was already approved when I was already in the US. And I think it was fortunate that I was involved in two Picari projects because that meant that I was already in the US. So I can already meet with one of the researchers in our research project who's
Mm-hmm.
actually just in a nearby campus. Well, it's not really nearby, but it's in Berkeley.
In Berkeley.
It's a BART ride away. I guess it helped that I was also in the Surgical Innovations Fellowship program because we were able to consult the Surgical Innovations Group, the Pediatric Device Consortium,
Device.
about our project. And we were actually invited to one of the meetings of the Pediatric Device Consortium to present the Hearing for Life project. I think it was in 2016 also that our team for the Hearing for Life project visited UCSF to present our idea.
Wow. So that's like the introduction to biomedical
Mm-hmm.
innovations for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And after that, because the Hearing for Life project was a 2-year project, so it took most of our time. So I wasn't able to work on Dr. Rojas's plan to make the surgical innovation a college program. So they wanted Kathy and I to work on that project. So sort of institutionalize it in the College of Medicine or in UP Manila. So we finished the Hearing for Life project in 2018, but back then we were already planning to get another funding for the second phase of the project. So that meant we weren't able to work on the surgical innovation program for UP Manila. But I think Dean Chong was impressed about how we were able to collaborate with the College of Engineering to create a product. Even if we were just able to create just a prototype. I think Dean Chong realized that it's a doable research.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that UP Manila, the UP College of Medicine can be a pioneer in. So I think in a separate conversation or meeting with the dean, Dr. Wang was pitching a skills laboratory project. He wasn't talking about a biomedical innovation program back then. But Dr. Wang actually wanted a surgical and advanced surgical skills laboratory where orthopedic surgeons can conduct postgraduate courses to demonstrate certain skills to new surgical or new orthopedic surgery graduates. And I think it was that time that the dean realized that Dr. Wang can combine the skills laboratory with a biomedical device innovation laboratory. And that's when the dean looped me in with her conversation with Dr. Wang. They asked me if we can write something that can merge a biomedical laboratory with a skills laboratory. So that's how SIBOL was born. Actually, SIBOL is not the original name for the program. Maybe an interview with Dr. Wang
Yeah.
would be a good idea for you to bring that up. I think Dr. Wang was already pitching his ideas since 2018. And so in 2019, so I was looped in with Dr. Wang's team. So that was the time when we started to write the concept for what's going to be SIBOL. I think it's also started in April of 2019. We were planning to submit the proposal to the OST because the call for proposals with a bigger budget, the OST announces that as early as April, and they always have a deadline. So I think we were about to miss that deadline because we were thinking of a very ambitious project. So we had I think our budget was 100,000. So
100 million.
100 million, sorry, 100
100
million.
million.
100 million. We thought that we might not meet the deadline. We tried to get in touch with Dr. Montoya to make sure that we can still apply for a grant for that much money. During the first presentation of the project, we were shut down because LaSalle already has an innovation laboratory. It's also DOST funded, and DOST did not want to duplicate another project. And because we were really insistent about pushing for our program, we attended a meeting with the UST to be parang they wanted to create niche centers for innovation, product innovation, because they realized that the LSU wanted more of the robotics. They're more on the robotics and prosthetics side of innovation. And because of that, Dr. Wang and I decided that we can concentrate more on the surgical innovations. So that's why we named our project Surgical Innovations Laboratory and eventually named it into SIBOL. So it's a surgical innovation and biotechnology laboratory. So the biotechnology part, I'm not sure if we're at that level already, but a lot of faculty in UP Manila and Diliman can handle biotechnology stuff.
Yeah. And with the proximity with NIH also,
yes.
Hopefully in the future gather more faculty to work with more interdisciplinary groups. And I feel like with the journey that you've shared so far, one common denominator is you meet people and then encounter these opportunities that would open you to something that maybe you did not expect, like starting all the way from with choosing between ENT and surgery and then landing back somehow to surgical innovations. And I think one takeaway that I got from your story was how even though you're all clinicians, medicine is very big and people will meet each other. It's not only engineers meet the doctors, but it's the doctors in their own specialty gather to a single platform, and then engineers in their own specialty gather to that platform also. And then you come up with something like UPC Ball, where everyone would be working together, hopefully in the future. And maybe to wrap up this conversation, so I have these three things that I ask people that I invited the podcast. So first would be, what would be your advice to medical students who want to get into biomedical innovation?
Biomedical innovation is really it's a young field in the Philippines, but it's certain in the history of medicine, it's really not a new thing. If you read the history of the different subspecialties, how medicine grew, how surgery grew out of the field of barbers, you'd realize that doctors have been doing medical innovation ever since medicine was born became a profession. It's just that we don't know how to make these innovations possible. Certainly, even as a student, you would already witness problems in the clinics, in the operating room, in the hospital, and you'd have ideas on how to solve those problems. Maybe my advice to the students would be they shouldn't think that being in a clinical field should stop them from making or thinking about innovations. You may not be able to fabricate those innovations yourselves, but you will realize that there are a lot of people who can do that for you. It's just that you have to look for them in the right places. And hopefully, once we sustain SIBOL, once we were able to continue the efforts of doing biomedical research in the Philippines, even just in the college, looking for these people would not be very difficult anymore. I think that's the only hurdle that you need to overcome. You don't need to do all the innovations yourselves. Not all clinicians are born to be engineers as well, and we shouldn't take away that specialization from the engineers. They know a lot more. You may have the basic ideas, but there are a lot of people who can do those things better than us. It's more of building a team than doing things yourself. Okay. I'm not sure if I was able to answer your
Yeah.
that
Yes.
question.
Yes. So my second question would be, what would be your tips or advice for engineers who would like to work with health or with clinicians? How should we
Mhm.
approach you? How do
Uh,
we solve problems together?
in my experience watching how the research teams in UCSF work on problems, the clinicians present the problems, and the engineers they listen intently. Okay, they wait for you to finish your presentation before they ask anything. So what I understand about engineers is that they want to see the problem not just in the microscopic level, but they want a bigger picture of your problem. They want more context. They want specifics, but they want to look at to see the context of your problem. That's when I realized that the way we think as doctors, it's not really different on how engineers think. It's just that they understand more engineering problems better. So when we're faced with engineering problems, it's really hard for clinicians to solve that. But it's an easy task for engineers, and engineers can think of a lot of ways to solve a problem. Maybe for my message for the engineers, it's just do what you do. You don't have to unlearn many things. Whatever your professors taught you in engineering school, whenever you talk to doctors, apply those skills, your methodology. Most doctors might be stubborn. They might be thinking that you're wasting too much time thinking about a small problem. But if once we see how you present your solution, then most clinicians would realize, oh, I never realized that we can look at that problem in that perspective, and we can solve it that way. So just always wear your engineering hat. You don't have to think like doctors. Thinking like doctors might cause problems in how you handle your problem-solving methodologies. I've witnessed that in how our Heli group developed our product. The clinicians would just present what we need, and then the researchers would design. Maybe the inputs that would matter would be the presentation of the product, how the users will be able to interact with the product. Those are the. But I know that it's also in the realm of engineering, especially industrial engineering, on how users interact with a certain product.
In summary, your advice would be for engineers to be really good at what you do,
Yes.
but at the same time be able to communicate with people from different fields.
Yes.
Yeah, I need
Yes.
right.
You should be able to communicate what you wanted to say, your engineering, the engineering terms to non-engineers. That's also our problem: how to communicate clinical terms to engineers. Those are two skills that we have to work on.
Right. And that's actually where the biomedical engineers would come in. They're like the hybrids.
And we're not yet thinking about the business side of the product.
Yeah. Yeah. So my last question would be, I just said what's next. So maybe we can talk about where do you think biomedical innovations is going, or what's next for UPC Ball?
Well, I think when you talk about biomedical innovations in the UP Manila and the UP College of Medicine, I think it's here to stay. There's no other way but to move forward, to make bigger projects, And we witnessed this when the pandemic hit. The core people of SIBOL were able to meet the challenge of developing products that would address the problems of the pandemic. So I think the SIBOL has already proven its capacity to write grants, to produce ideas. And maybe what's missing is we've already proven that we can create products. There are already SIBOL products that's ready to for testing. What's missing is the marketability. I think the readiness of the technology to be marketed. Maybe in terms of biomedical engineering terms, we have the TRLs, the technological readiness level.
Readiness level.
In my opinion, we're at level 5. Is that the right assessment?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, we have a working prototype and
yes,
it's getting ready for scale up.
Yes. I think the scaling up of the products is the major challenge because we have the research labs, we have the research faculties, but we lack the manufacturing environment, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We have industry partners, but they're limited, in my opinion. Unlike in the US, where most of the big names in innovations and medical device manufacturing, they're there. In the Philippines, most of the manufacturing units here are third-party manufacturers. They don't have the capacity to market whatever products they produce. They can manufacture your products, but they won't buy the license to produce those products and market them. I think that's what's missing in the Philippines. The only option would be to create a startup to produce the capital to market, to bankroll the production of those devices. It's easy to look for the manufacturers who can produce them, but the big problem would be the
supply chain and sustaining it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And being able to tie in a brand that would carry the product to the market.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Doc Philip. Thank you so much for taking the time to share a bit about your experiences and mga pangaral.
I hope I was able to make sense out of whatever I'm saying.
That is it for this chat. If you like this episode or would like to suggest a future topic, let me know by sending me a quick message. I'm always looking for interesting conversations and hope to share more similar stories in the future. My Twitter handle is at roxalt, that's ROXSALT. You may also send me an email at roxalt.acc@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in and see you in the next one.